Hey, New Hope family, it's Pastor Matt with your devotional thought for today. In Genesis 11, Moses writes, "Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.' And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, 'Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech.' So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city." You may be familiar with this story that I've just read. It's the story of the Tower of Babel, and that place was called Babel because that is where the Lord confused their language. But Babel is also the word for the city of Babylon. And Babylon, as we see throughout the Old Testament, but then also in the book of Revelation, is representative of the evil intentions and evil aspirations of mankind. It's kind of the almost the epitome of evil. It's representative of that in many places when you think about Babel and Babylon. And so this is not actually the Lord trying to keep man from being successful in this life. In fact, if you look, the text is very specific with some keywords here to help us understand why God is dispersing them and how it's actually, yes, it's a punishment of sorts, but it's really for their benefit. It's to prevent them from continuing on in their evil aspirations against him and letting their pride drive mankind away from godliness, away from God's connection whatsoever. So we have to look at where this is historically in context and recognize that Genesis 11, this is after Genesis 10, which records the genealogies of Noah and his family, and it discusses how people started to disperse at that time. But you go before that to Genesis 9, you're getting post-flood narrative. And one of the commands that the Lord gives in Genesis 9 is once again reiterated to the people that they are to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So really they are called to then spread out, fill the earth. And this is their first act of defiance coming right out of that, right? Immediately, as it says they're settling out in the east, they're moving in the east, they find a plain in Shinar and determine to settle there. All the peoples gathering together. And this is not, again, God wanting to keep them from being successful in life or from flourishing when he says nothing will be impossible for them. This is all in the context of their defiance. We have to recognize that that is the attitude with which they're doing this. It's in disobedience that they've settled there, and they want to make these strong bricks to build a tower that will be immovable so that they can defy God. They want to build it up to the heavens to make a name for themselves. They're not worried about worshiping God. They have no thought towards God, and we see that also earlier on already in the book of Genesis. But here in particular, we see this taking place, this big act of defiance to build this tower that will be up to heaven. And I appreciate so much how Moses records that God says, let's go down and see what they're doing. So even as they are building this tower up to heaven, they're not going to reach God. They're not going to be able to ascend into his realm. Right? So God still has to condescend. He still has to come down to them in order to, view what they're doing, right? I think it's an intentional statement there in the writing that even as these are their aspirations, they still aren't accomplishing what they desire. But God, yes, punishes them in this, for sure. It's a punishment that they're dispersed and their language is confused. But it's an act of his grace and mercy, I believe, as well. Instead of destroying them and killing them in that instance, God is graciously spreading them out, and so that the totality of their evil desires, the evil that they want to accomplish for their own sake, their own pride, and all of that, will not keep them from completely separating from the Lord, right? So the Lord is separating them so that they don't come together and continue to persist in evil ways, amounting to the totality of evil that they would desire to carry out against the Lord. So in his grace and in his mercy, and yes, as a punishment for their sin, he separates them, but again, because of his mercy and because of his grace, so that they might not fulfill the totality of their evil. He confuses their language so that life might be prevailing, that life might continue on instead of having to once again destroy humanity like he did with the flood, with leaving that one remnant. And so I think as we look at this story, we see that God is gracious in this, and we see warnings for us that we ought to not try to make a name for ourselves. Look out for the pride of our hearts, that we might think of ourselves more highly than we ought, and instead humbly go before the Lord, thank him for the life that we have, the life that he sustains within us, and seek to give him glory and not glorify in ourselves.